Hi, I'm Claire Williamson, an ex-litigator and the co-founder of Leading Minds. With 97% of lawyers complaining that stress is impacting their health, I think it's time we speak about how challenging the pressures of the legal industry can be. So this podcast is a space where lawyers can discuss the challenges they've overcome in their career and how they've gone on to thrive. Whether you're a trainee, a partner, or anyone in between, I really hope that this podcast will leave you feeling inspired, empowered, and with the confidence that you can leave your mark on the legal industry. So today I'm joined by Sam Dalling, who's an associate at Sackers, and Sam will be talking to us about creating openness in the legal sector. Thank you so much for joining me today, Sam.
You're very welcome, Claire. Hello, hello. How are you?
Hi. I'm really well, thank you. And yourself?
Excellent.
Great. So I thought maybe we would start by having a little introduction to your career journey so far. So where did you train? Where did you study? Where did you qualify? Train and qualify the same thing, but you get me.
Yes, well, I'll start, which way should I go? I'll start from the beginning. I went up to the university in Durham, which was a long way from home, my parents, but also I have a lot of family up there. So it was really nice to get away and have some freedom, but also be able to go to my grandparents for the weekend. And then I did my LPC up there too at Northumbria Uni, which was fantastic because it enabled me to keep my season ticket at Newcastle United for another year, which is very, very important. And then I went down to, well, I lived in London. I actually reverse commuted from London out to Reading to a place called, a firm called Pitmans, who were a mid-level commercial firm. So they're kind of full service, but at a level where I actually got some really real hands-on experience. It was really nice people, good quality of training, quite a small trainee intake, but that was really good fun. And so I reverse commuted for the first year, and then was in their London office for the second year, and then moved to Sackers when I qualified.
Amazing. And did you study law at university then?
I did the cheats way, the 3 years spread out. It was good fun. I always wanted to do that, and it was nice because I think, well, I've not done the GDL, but from what I understand, it's quite different. You touch on a lot of things very quickly, and you don't get to look at some of the more academic, theoretical side of things, which is what I quite enjoyed.
I must be completely honest. When I started studying law, I didn't realize that you could study anything and then go on to be a lawyer. Because I didn't come from a background where that was kind of commonly known. So I actually studied Scottish law and then had to also do the GDL because I wanted to work in London. So yeah, I did it both ways.
Excellent. Well, you might as well, at least you can now speak of experience of both ways. So
Exactly. I have got all the qualifications, even whereas Scottish law degree is a 4-year qualification. So I've got that, plus the GDL, plus the LPC, and now I don't even practice.
Then you left law behind you. But still, you've got lots of letters next to your name. So that's always one.
Exactly. And so you are working at Sackers, but you also have an interesting sideline, which I thought I would love you to tell us a little bit more about.
Wow, yeah. Interesting to some people, I suppose. It's quite, I'm a pensions lawyer, and I write I hate to use the word journalist, but I do write a bit of stuff about cricket. So in the Venn diagram, it's a very small crossover in the Venn diagram, but I'd done some work experience when I was a student, and I almost wish I'd stuck with it, because this was in the days of when podcasting wasn't really a thing. So me and my friends have always said, oh, we did a couple of kind of pilot, I suppose, episodes. And one of my friends found them on an old computer the other day, which was quite funny. And you definitely couldn't have aired them. But so, yeah, I did some work experience, and I had my training contract, and a very nice editor who I still speak to today, actually. He still keeps an eye on my stuff and gives me a few hints. And he said, basically, Sam, don't be an idiot, go and do law, and if you want to, you can come back to this. And it was sensible advice, and I always hoped I'd get back to it, but there was never really time. And then what has happened over the last year happened, and suddenly, funnily enough, my social life disappeared. I've always been one to go to loads of live events and live sport gigs, and so I just picked it up from there, and it's certainly carried me through lockdown quite nicely. It's been a good outlet.
Yeah, and how do you anticipate that happening going forward? Are you going to be able to continue it when we're let out again, if we're ever let out again?
As and when we're let out again, I hope so. It's a balance. So I'm very lucky. I work a 4-day week as it is, so I have that extra day to do something a little bit different. So I'm hoping to keep doing it then, and so I go to some football games, which is quite good fun. It's fun at the moment, but actually they can be quite stressful. I almost prefer it as a fan than working under deadline pressure. If you're in an evening game, the game finishes at 9:45 and they want something from you. They call it on the whistle. So as soon as the game finishes for the first edition of the paper, and can you imagine if you have a 92nd minute winner, something you can't write about something until it's happened, I tend to find. So that it can be quite stressful.
So almost your legal training has set yourself up for this, haven't you? It gave you that, like, I can work until 3 in the morning, no problem. Perfect.
Well, yes, I suppose that is true. They're very different styles of writing. I will say that. I have to be careful crossing back over.
Oh, very much so. Sorry, I meant more the intensity of being able to meet last minute demands.
Yes, that side is true. I have to sometimes read my emails again and think, no, that's fine for a creative headline, but it's not great in a legal paper.
I love it. And do you think that although the twos are completely separate, do you think it has given you some interesting kind of insights into like alternative skill sets?
Yeah, it is interesting. You meet different people, you learn. I always like, it's a weird one because I'm quite introverted in many ways, but I do like meeting new people in kind of smaller environments. So it'd be nice to go out and meet some different people and see how work works differently. And yeah, it was a very different lifestyle. There's been some crossover actually. A few of my clients have read bits and pieces, and I've had some. It's quite nice. I can do some business development we have to do at work, which is a part of work I struggle with a little bit. I'm not naturally as good as that kind of thing, but actually having coffee with a client on Zoom and talking about cricket, I can definitely do. So that definitely helped there.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I work a lot with junior members, and it's definitely something that I remember thinking when I was a junior member at a firm, that I didn't really know how to incorporate my kind of hobbies into my professional life. Like, what was the balance? Should I have no personality? Should I show a bit of person? You know, it's like finding that thing. So I think having something like this, it seems so positive that actually it's gave you something that you can run with your clients and actually build that rapport, because I think many junior, members of teams are very reluctant to maybe show any of their personal life. Would you agree?
Yeah, I maybe go too far the other way sometimes, but we're very lucky in pensions. Often we have the nature of the work is you have quite long-standing advisorial roles, so it's not like a transaction. You have that client, you do the transaction, months later, that's it, it's done. Some of our clients have been with the firm since it first started. That the chap called Harry Sacco who started out, we've had clients all the way through. So actually, in some ways, we get to have those more personal relationships with clients. I mean, there's a balance to be had, as you said, but it's nice. You've known clients for years, and actually being able to, that's one of the soft skills I don't think you can necessarily teach. And we try and have those sessions at Sackett. If you can remember a client's name or what they if they do something every year at Christmas and recall that actually really helps break the ice.
Yeah, I used to take little notes, which is a bit sad.
And sometimes you have to tell clients things that they don't necessarily want to hear. And if you've got a bit more of a personal relationship and a way of breaking the ice, then it can be easier to deliver that message.
Definitely. The main reason I actually invited you on the podcast today was, although I am particularly thrilled by your sports journalism and pensions lawyer kind of alter ego, I think that's really interesting, was actually because I read an article that you had wrote for LawCare earlier this month. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, of course. I suppose that at its simplest level, it boils down to that, I was about to say for the last few years, but you can go back as long as you like. So I had previously been in treatment for, I'm going to say an eating disorder, but it's almost eating disorders plural, because they're this strange thing that, so I've never met anyone else with an eating disorder that's had a very clearly defined something or other. There's different names for there's common tags: anorexia, bulimia, orthorexia. There's new ones developing, well, not new ones developing, but new names for them. But actually, it's all, they change and they kind of they always look a little bit different, and that's how they can, I find sometimes that can reel you in, because you do something slightly different and think it's for the better, but actually it's not necessarily motivated. But anyway, so the crux of it is that I have previously been in treatment for that, and I say that I'm in recovery, constantly in recovery and constantly trying to work on it. And lockdown has been difficult for everyone. It's a time that's really tested my recovery and the strength of my recovery at certain times, because a lot of my coping mechanisms went, in-person therapy, routine, and when I'm stressed and when I'm anxious, my default is to go back to those, because they tell me they are my safety mechanism, and actually it's just reinforcing bad behaviors. But so the article I wrote was touching on that, and how lockdown has been difficult from that perspective.
Yeah, and thank you for speaking so openly, because I do think it's, a topic that, just mental health in general, I don't think is very well spoken about in the legal sector. However, that does feel like it's kind of changing since even the start of lockdown. Previously, I know there was quite a lot of campaigns like "This Is Me," but they didn't kind of seem to kind of go anywhere. And I think since the last year, there has been a lot more openness around about the fact that people are struggling, whether because of a pre-existing condition, whether something else, whether just the daily struggles. But I think it takes quite a strong person to actually put their hand up and write something as personal as you did. And I just wondered, what actually drove you to do that?
Sorry, yeah, very nice of you to say. I'm not very good at receiving nice comments. That's why it tells me I shouldn't have those. But I suppose it's my way. I'm sometimes not a great talker when it comes to emotions and feelings, or I certainly wasn't. But well, I do law, I do journalism. They're two kind of writing heavy, so words and using language in that way are my way of putting my thoughts down. It's cathartic to put it down. It makes sense, when I have such simple things that I can do when I'm well, like I've been really bad at it a lockdown, keeping a journal. I know it sounds so simple, like doing that, it does make such a difference, just writing thoughts down and seeing them. I just stopped doing it. So I felt like I wanted to write something. I wrote another piece that went on a newspaper's website. So I hadn't really told my parents that I was struggling again. I also hadn't told them I was putting this article out with my name on it. And I don't know, I was hoping it wouldn't get around to them, but it turned out that one of their friends did read it and pointed them in that direction. So in a way, it can be my way of telling people. It's much easier for me to send a link to someone and say, "Oh, look, read this that I've written," than call someone up and say, "I'm struggling a little bit." So
And it was, I must say as well, it was a very heartfelt, well-written article. Like, it actually brought a bit of a tear to my eye when I read it. That I was like, wow, like someone just being so willing to be vulnerable. And I use that in the best possible sense. I mean that in a comfortable, kind of open, to be able to kind of say that. So yeah, I understand why you did use that talent and contribute those two together to come up with your written article. Were you obviously concerned about parents, family, friends, but what about in terms of kind of professionally? Did you have any concerns about that, or was that part of it for you as well? Or was it not even a conscious decision, actually, maybe?
Saved by the Bell.
And that's that.
I was just hoping we did do our census, but I've seen people running around knocking on door with census vests on, obviously trying to catch people. But so anyway, I have been terrifically lucky in that where I work, I can be very open about it, and that doesn't mean I run around the corridors shouting about it, but that does mean that everyone who needs to be is aware of it. And it's a kind of workplace. I basically got lucky with where I work, because it's at this place where everybody is just fundamentally very nice, and amazingly good at what they do, but also very caring. And so you're allowed in inverted commas, people's lives come first, because they value, but I suppose we're there for the long term, a bit like clients are. They value people and having them there for the long term. And so actually you're allowed, a family emergency, a medical emergency comes first. So when I first joined was just after I'd had a first go at treatment 4 or 5 years ago. I'd had this didn't know I was going to go here. It was when I was quite dangerously thin at that point, and I had this month where a relationship had just ended. I had to move out of the flat I was starting at Saka's a month later, so there was a lot of change going on.
Yeah.
And I went to this treatment centre, but was doing it as a day patient. And basically I was going through the motions, doing it to show other people I was doing it, and it got a little bit better, but I wasn't fully committing to it, and I wasn't staying there overnight. And then over the course of that year it kind of got worse again, and so that's when I initially wrote something, actually, and that's how I showed it to the HR lady, well, it's the HR, yeah, and a partner who we have sort of group leaders. Everyone has someone that they have that checks in on them, and they manage the workload. And there was a while where I wasn't particularly well, but was still, well, I say high functioning, I don't know if I was or not, but not really in a place where I wanted to get help. I was still enjoying, for want of a better word, being in it, or it was serving me. I felt like it was serving me. So we knew that at some point I would basically go in one day and say, right, now I need to go to treatment. So and then that happened, and kind of I told everybody. And actually, when you're slightly vulnerable with people open up with you. And so I've had like amazing support at work, and so I've been very lucky, and people are aware of it. And I can say if I'm struggling, I can say, and hopefully other people are the same at work. They can do the same thing. So my experience is perhaps slightly different to what I imagine it might be. I've never had that experience at another law firm, so I don't know. But
yeah, I really appreciate your openness about this, because I know it must be quite kind of revealing talking about it or feeling like that. But I actually, when I was at Slaughter May, I lost my dad as a trainee to motor neuron disease. And I had the same experience of you, actually, that I was really conscious initially of not wanting to show that, because I didn't want to be seen as different. Like, I just wanted to get on with my job. I wanted to, enough was going on. Like, I just thought, God, I can't let this part of my life fall apart as well. Head down, like, keep going. But it was impossible because of everything that was going on. And I found the same, that by showing my vulnerability, it actually built stronger working relationships with people around me. But also, I felt better placed, actually, at times where I felt people would say to me, do you know what, like, we've been here too long, or it just felt like different on all different levels, whether that was a really personal thing or whether it was kind of more work related thing. So I do think that often we think, oh, we need to be seen as this person who's like invincible and not show any sign of weakness, but actually when we do it, I think it really develops relationships.
yeah, I agree. I am certainly not invincible, even though at times I think I convinced myself I was. And I don't know, you have this heightened sense of self-importance. Like, well, I can't leave because the whole place will fall apart if I'm not here.
I always say that to trainees when they're really stressing out. I'm like, just so you know, like, very rarely did like the senior partner of Slaughter May just send me an email like, Claire, we need you.
It's funny, isn't it? And then 6 weeks later I came back, and someone said, oh, did you have a nice holiday? It's like, I've been away a couple of weeks. Oh, yeah, it was fine.
Great time back. And in terms of, am I right in thinking that the articles that you wrote recently were the first time you actually put your name on it and shared it openly? Or
yes,
yeah,
I'd written a couple on a blog, actually, and then one on LawCare without putting my name on them. And I don't know why, really. I think I had time to overthink about this time. I spoke to one person about it who is someone from work actually, who's been amazingly supportive and checks in on me. I have very open conversations. So I spoke to him. I deliberately decided not to, because I don't know, I have a tendency of doing, well, similar to government policy at the moment. They seem to leak something and see what the reaction is, and then make their decision. So I will go to various different people and see what the people think about it.
I love that analogy.
And then overthink it. So I thought, no, I'm just going to make, it's something I would like to do. I could find, in the same way you Google, I could find 10 people that would support it and 10 people that would say it's a bad idea. So you can always find that. So I just did it, and the feedback has been, I had a fair few, loads of people from work checked in. A couple of clients even emailed, said, "Oh, is that you?" Which was really nice. So yeah, I deliberately didn't then look at the comments on the website for a while, although they do filter them for those kind of articles. So I had a couple of offers for professional help, which was interesting, alternative therapies and things.
Alternative therapies.
So
see, I'm into all that stuff. If it's got no scientific evidence, send it my way.
yes.
I would have been like, yeah, definitely, I'll be a guinea pig for that.
But it was a bit scary, and I wondered how I'd feel afterwards, and actually felt okay. There's still times like, oh, it's now out there, I can't take it back. But then anyone in my life that needs to know about it already does, really. So
yeah. And do you think people's perception of you, were you concerned about people's perception of you following this?
I don't know. I mean, I get so into it's one of the things I talked a lot with a therapist about it, is worrying about people's perception, because it goes back to that sense of self-importance, worry, assuming the world revolves around yourself, when actually most people are so tied up in their own stuff in the nicest possible way. They're not really perceiving you as anything. So it'd be easy for me to sit here and say, oh yeah, I don't care what people think of me. That probably isn't true. That'd be disingenuous. But I try and come back, and there are definitely times where I worried about it, but I try and come back to the people that I know, and people's perception who matter, really. They didn't change. It wasn't particularly new. Well, apart from my parents who didn't know, but it wasn't massively new information. So yeah,
and it's interesting as well that clients actually had such a strong relationship with you, that they actually came forward to support you. I think that's such a positive sign.
That was really nice. And there's one particular client who I talked to about cricket quite a lot, and he was almost straight within about half an hour. He must have read it over his lunchtime and was like, well, yeah, I don't think there could be many other Sam Dallings in London who are lawyers. Is that you? If it's not you, sorry, completely ignore me, I'm chatting rubbish. But so yeah, that was actually quite nice.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think it's strengthened relationships?
I suppose you'd have to ask other people. I try and be open. So it helps. I mean, in a way, it helps me to be open, because it now means I can say, if I'm not okay, it's all right to say I'm not okay, and I don't necessarily need to explain it in masses of detail. It's definitely strengthened some people that can relate to it.
Yeah.
Suddenly, and it's a surprising number of people that can relate to it, maybe not on exactly the same level, but in another context. I remember when I was first telling people about it, people I wouldn't necessarily expected, because I prejudged they wouldn't relate to it, suddenly said, oh, I had friends with this, or a family member had that, and okay, yeah, you can relate. It is more common. It isn't just me.
Yeah. Do you think overall as well, it's been a positive experience for you, feeling that you were able to have this openness around about the eating disorders and kind of your mental health? Obviously it is a mental health.
Yeah, because everyone has I'm really conscious of not sounding like someone who's sitting here like preaching and being like all guru and calm, because I'm not. Like, it's not. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm all right all the time. Everyone has it, and I think mental health, that is. And this last year is testing people that sometimes wouldn't necessarily suffer, for want of a better word, with the mental health side of things. So it helps with a check and balance. If people know, it helps my accountability. A lot of the thing with eating disorders is makes you very secretive and hide things, because you're sneaking around trying to avoid eating and getting really defensive. With my housemates say, I haven't seen you had any food, and you go, well, that's because I had it earlier on when you weren't in. And if you're making yourself sick, there are ways you have to be quite creative and careful to hide that, doing it at the right times, running taps, brushing teeth, whatever. So by being open about it, there's that accountability, because I find it I find it difficult to lie to people.
Yeah.
So actually, if someone's saying, have you done that? I'm like, well. Whereas if no one knows, no one's checking, and you just can dig into your own pit. And sometimes people will say, have you done that? Are you eating properly? Have you been to the bathroom? And you get defensive and say, no. But other times, but even if that's fine, even if a minute later you can go, oh yeah, that I'm probably not doing the right thing. So anything you can get to reinforce, any checks and balances.
Yeah. And the reason I kind of have like delved so much into, sorry, I feel like I've like gave you like a police witness interview, was just because, with people that I speak to, and especially junior members of the team, they're very concerned about being open around about their mental health. And we actually ran a webinar this morning, which is all about finding sustainable success in the legal sector as a junior member. And there was a really great survey run by the Corporate Law Academy, and some of the stats out there, I think it was 86% of aspiring lawyers have felt like they've in the last month struggled with their mental health. And it was something like 46% felt like senior leaders didn't care about mental health. 47% felt law firms weren't doing enough to support mental health. And I think, don't quote me on this one I can't quite remember, 67% thought they wouldn't be open or feel comfortable being open with graduate recruitment around about any mental health challenges they may have. Please, anyone that's listening, if I've got those, please give me a little creative scope of interpretation if I've missed those slightly. I'm just taking them off the top of my head. But it's just such a huge issue for people entering the legal sector, more than I think ever before, that they have this concern that they can't be open because it will have a negative impact on their career. And that was why I was so keen to speak to you when I saw your article, because as I said, it was an amazing, articulate, well-written, powerful article. Am I making you awkward by giving you compliments again? It was awful. It was an awful article, and that's why I wanted to speak to you about it, to pull you up on it. No, but also, just because it did show that willingness to be open, that I'm very forthcoming with now, but this has only been in the last year for me. I lost my dad 9 years ago, and it's only in the last year that I have ever said or ever mentioned that happened to me, because I think it does help people relate. So that's why I was so kind of digging into this with you.
Yeah, no, that's completely all right. I'm sorry to hear about your dad, by the way. Because I interview people, flipping it around slightly, did you find that once you said it the first time, it was then easier?
Yeah, but then also I have this weird thing that like I didn't realize I was going to mention it today. Like but then I'm a bit like, oh God, are people going to be fed up of hearing about this? Or they'll be like, yeah, well, we know you lost your dad and it was awful, and it was awful. But there's a little bit of me that's like being so open about it now, and that I'm a little bit like, oh, do people think this is a bit like, okay, we get it?
I know, but then I suppose that I'm laughing because I relate so much to that.
Do you? Like this has become something that defines me.
That's again the turning people around, assuming other people's opinions and being like, oh, that's what they must be thinking. And I do that all the time. So that must, I walk past someone in the corridor at work and they might not say hello. And my head says, oh, what have I done? My head tends to go to, I'm being sacked. Everyone has decided, they finally realized I'm no good. I'm being sacked. So everyone is being told not to talk to me, and I'm just waiting for someone to come around and clear me out this thing. What's probably happened is that person is having a naff day, is a little bit stressed, or just hasn't seen me in the corridor. But
Yeah. Have you ever listened to Elizabeth Day's How to Fail podcast?
I think I have.
Oh my goodness, I just totally forgotten the name of the guy that was on, but he was like he worked for Google. He was one of the top guys at Google, and he actually lost his son when he was like his son was in his early 20s. And he then started to go on this mission of like finding like, how did you have like an algorithm for happiness? And he was on the Elizabeth Day podcast. I'm gonna have to figure out what his name is and send it to you afterwards, but he basically said that he calls his brain, I think it's like Betty or something,
Right.
and he's like, come on Betty, is that the truth? So being able to like be the observer of your thoughts. And I found myself doing that now, that if I'm like going off on this massive tangent, I kind of check in and I'm like, is that really happening, or are you just making this like like, are you just a bit bored? Like, have you got nothing to do? Like,
when I was in treatment, so they gave us, so I was in it was a general addiction clinic, which was actually really helpful to see how you relate to other people. But there was an eating disorder group, whatever, I can't remember what the word was, but so we worked a lot on separating the so-called, the eating disorder was ED, so it was the ED voice and turning the volume up and down, and I reveled in going back to work and saying, oh, I'm better now, I've just got a voice in my head that sometimes tells me.
that's basically what I've just admitted as well, so we're just all going to be like struck off.
But there's all kinds of techniques, and I am not really qualified to say anything about them. But one thing that did stick, the therapist told me that certain things stick, and one is when I'm having those kind of thoughts, it's sort of write down, something like 3 lines. What's an alternative way to doing it, of thinking about it? What would you tell your friend if it came to you, and if they came to you with that? And what would you say to your friend? I've got that wrong way around. What would you say to your friend? What would your friend say to you? And what's an alternative way? And then when you write it down, you're, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Probably not going to get sacked. Probably just someone's walked past me in the corridor.
Yeah. Probably okay here at the moment. And if I am going to get sacked, there's nothing to do but now. So crack on with what I was doing.
Yes, exactly.
I really appreciate your time today. And I just wanted to finish off the interview with a couple of questions that I always ask people, which I haven't told you in advance, and you're looking slightly nervous about now. The first one I wanted to know was, what does resilience mean to you?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's a question. And
You don't like being interviewed, do you? I can
with the
tell.
answer.
You like came into yourself when you turned it on the table and started interviewing me there.
Yeah, I know. That's the technique. It's actually thrown me. I suppose initially, my initial reaction was the ability to kind of keep going, but I know how unhealthy that can be in a certain way. So I want to say something like to be able to keep going, but also recognizing where things are too much, or if it doesn't have to be just blind resilience. You don't have to just keep going and going, even though actually letting go a little bit doesn't feel like it should fit within the definition of resilience. But I don't want to say
that. I like turning it like that. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. It's almost like learning your own kind of ability to see when actually you do have to let certain things go, and that is building resilience, isn't it? I suppose. Yeah, I quite like that.
And if it's trial and error, that can involve making mistakes. And if it's trial and error, I've got this one amazing partner at work who is just, I'll send an email out and it'll be slightly wrong, and I'll be panicking and I'll say, I'm really, really sorry. Don't worry, none of us are perfect. It's all absolutely fine. As long as you don't keep doing the same thing wrong, I think, then yeah.
That's good. I love it. You've been so open. You've spoken about making mistakes, which nobody speaks about in the legal sector, and mental health. You deserve a medal. The second thing,
probably get sacked.
Yeah, and that guy didn't speak to me earlier. I'm definitely getting sacked. The other thing I was going to ask you was, what would your number one tip for sustainable success in the legal sector be?
Oh, you don't have to do everything. Try and do one thing at a time. And this is those, you know, do as I say, not as I do, I get really, if I've got a long to-do list, I'm constantly trying to, I'm thinking about the next thing all the time. So I have these little, it sounds a bit wishy-washy, but I have post-it notes on my computer, and just like to remind me of that, because I forget in the stress, I forget stuff like that. So I have really simple things, like just little sayings, but basically they all come down to do that one thing and then think about the next thing.
Being a bit more mindful with the way you're working. I like that.
And just get to where you can get at the end of the day and then go again. But I am not someone who always puts that into practice by any means.
I also love that you earlier said you went down to 4-day working week and then took on another job. So it's like, yeah, definitely. Just do what you can do.
Yes, I know. But yeah, that's true. I didn't do that when the world was I used to have a wonderful time. I tend to be off in the midweek, and I love the theatre and things. So I'd go off to like live vicariously through people at matinees, and you'd meet some really interesting people, a lot of whom were in the industry, who'd all be in the kind of day tickets together, and they'd be talking about their auditions and what they were going to, and they'd ask me, and I was like, don't mind me, I'm just a lawyer here to, you guys are far more interesting.
Yeah, just having a lovely Wednesday afternoon. I'll just eavesdrop in. Amazing. Yes. And the final thing I wanted to ask you as well is, who inspires you in the legal sector?
Oh, I mean,
I know it's cruel that I don't tell people these in advance, but I just love seeing people's reaction and see what comes out of their mouth instead of letting people give the time to prep. Because I think as lawyers, we like doing that, right?
It is cruel, but I can't really complain, because whenever I get an agent that says, oh, can I have the questions in advance? I say, no, absolutely not. That's not how journalism works. I listen, and then I ask questions based on the reactions. So there are various people at work, a lot of people at work. The partner I talked about, who is just a brilliant mind, and the clients love them. The clients, because they have just such a personable manner about them, that actually the clients trust them and know that they will be there, and that they have their interests at heart. So there's a couple of people like that at work.
Amazing.
But yeah, I'm just very lucky to be where I am.
Yeah, it sounds like a fantastic firm to work at. After this, they're going to be inundated with people wanting to move over to Sackers.
I know. As long as I get a cut of the.
Yeah, be like Sackers poster boy. Come and work with us. We're great. Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me, and again for speaking so openly and honestly. I really appreciate it. I know it's, a difficult thing to be the person to start the kind of trend of being open, but I do think, even if it means 1, 2, 300 people feel that they can have that conversation with their supervisor or anybody within their team, I think it's an amazing thing to have done. So thank you for joining me today.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure. I'm definitely not a trendsetter. There are other very brave people that have done it before, and so I'm just following in there. Yeah, that's how I look at it. If one person reads one of the articles I read and recognises something in themselves or someone else, then that's great, really. And hopefully. You're also the worst person I've ever met at taking compliments. I think I'm going to just send you one daily on LinkedIn. That's one more final treatment story, was affirmations. We used to have to do that. It was so awkward. We're 15 people who that is just not what they want to hear. You'd have to stand up in front of the room and say a few things like, I am this, I am, and everyone would say weird and wonderful. So I am slightly good at drawing circles or something, and the counsellor would be like, no, you can do better. Come on, Sam, start again. Amazing. To everyone listening to the podcast today, thank you so much for joining us. And also, if you would like to subscribe to our bi-weekly episodes, please go on leadingminds.com/podcast, leadingmindsglobal.com/podcast. That was very smooth. Well done, Claire. And also follow us on LinkedIn as well. So thank you. And thanks, Sam, for joining.